Awesome. Well, thank you, Corrine, for doing this. I'm super excited that, we're going to have this opportunity to share what you're doing and what you have going on with folks who are also interested in Uncommon Pastures farms. So to get started, do you want to share with us a little bit about your background and kind of what led you into the work that you're currently doing?
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much for having me, Catherine. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so my name is Karine. I run a business called Broken Ground, and I have been teaching people in cold climates how to grow their own food for over 10 years now. And I got involved with it in an unexpected way. I'd spent a lot of time in the peace and social justice field and the human rights field, specifically in Latin America. And so I was an activist, and I was kind of steeped in everything that we're doing wrong in the world, so to speak. And I started to look for more positive solutions to what we were seeing. And from a young age, I've always been concerned about ecological issues and ecological crises and wildlife habitat loss. And so I was looking for a way to, do something positive and contribute positively to doing something rather than being part of the problem. So I first got involved with permaculture. I took a permaculture design course back in 2006. Did an apprenticeship in organic gardening, and then did more study in permaculture and started my business in 2011. But really, even though my grandmother was a gardener and had a dairy cow for a while, and some chickens, and my mom had a garden, I didn't learn gardening from them or growing food from them. I think that kind of disconnect from our industrial, because of the industrial food system, that disconnect has led to us kind of rediscovering gardening through classes and courses and our community, rather than maybe it being passed down from generations, which is how it used to be.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Well, I commend you for taking that step to kind of get out of the mindset about like focusing on all the problems, because I kind of fall into that trap all the time myself. And there's so much good that can be done and accomplished through community-based solutions. So thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. So we actually met at a soil crawl when you came over to Big Timber, and you were giving your presentation to the Northern Plains Resource Council, where we pasture some of our animals. So that was, unfortunately, I wasn't able to stay for your presentation because I had little kids I was chasing around. But I understood at that point that you were doing some really cool work. So I'm glad we could make this happen.
Yeah.
To that point, I wanted to kind of ask, for those who don't know, like, can you give your definition of what is permaculture? And also, like, from my own interest, I was wondering, how would you say that when you begin to practice it, it sort of bleeds into those other areas of a person's life?
Yeah, great question. So permaculture stands for permanent agriculture or permanent culture. And it's a design approach for sustainable living and land use that's rooted in the observation of natural systems. So I like to explain it that how do we look at natural systems and use and mimic them in the way that we design our yards and our gardens, but also out to our neighborhoods, to our communities, and to our lives. And so another definition that a lot of people use is permaculture is the art of creating beneficial relationships. So whether it's beneficial relationships between your plants and animals on your landscape, or whether it's beneficial relationships between people, or whether it's beneficial relationships between people and animals and plants, all of those different networks of relationships that we create in our lives. And so that is, permaculture, a lot of times, initially people come to it probably at a landscape level. They hear about it because they're interested in gardening, or they hear about it because they're interested in site design or something like that, or they've heard about it through, earthworks or pond building or something like that. But it can also be applied very much to a social level. So there's a set of ethics that are part of permaculture, and then there are a set of principles that you look at the landscape and in your life through that lens. So, the ethics are earth care, that everything has an intrinsic worth, people care, that we're doing this to take care of ourselves and to live, sustainably on this planet, and then fair share. And that's also called future care or limits aware, that we need to limit our consumption and be aware of what we consume. And that if we have a surplus in our system, we feed it back to the first two ethics. So if we have a surplus of manure in our system, it gets fed back into the soil. If we have a surplus of time, we use it to help our friend in the garden. If we have a surplus of veggies, we donate them to the food bank, or we give them to our neighbors and friends. So it's all about kind of creating a sense of community and reciprocity in our lives. And I'll also say that, a lot of permaculture concepts were innovated in part by Indigenous people and traditional ecological knowledge, but they were kind of organized by two Australians, Mollison and Holmgren, into this kind of design approach. And so you can take a lot of the principles of permaculture and apply them to your life. They kind of start to bleed into your life of like, oh, that's the principle of produce no waste, or oh, that's the principle of capture and store energy. Oh, that's the principle of self-regulate and accept feedback. And I think for you, you must constantly kind of live by those principles in working on the land and in having cattle.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. I learned so much there. And it ties into a lot of the things that, are very similar with like regenerative ag principles. But like, as someone who my faith, we're Catholic, and there's this beautiful structure of Catholic social teaching and the principle of subsidiary, where like in society, the lowest or smallest rather unit of organized society should handle what it can. And when it can't, it goes to the next level, right? So there's no hopping over people and doing for people what they can do for themselves. And that ties into kind of some of those ethics of permaculture. And then just like as I've always like been discovering more about regenerative ag and how permaculture ties into these things together, this idea of like giving back more than you take, and realizing that like in nature, there's really no such thing as waste. Mm-hmm. Right. And so all of these things, it's beautiful how they connect and feed into each other.
Yeah. I love that connection to Catholic social teaching too. I mean, that's one of the principles in permaculture is small and slow solutions. It's all about relocalizing our economies. And also the prime directive is taking responsibility for ourselves and our children, right? We've kind of lost that ability, lost what we can do with our hands. Yeah, we have the digital devices and we can type, but we can produce food, we can grow meals for ourselves. We can knit and sew and fix cars and, build houses, and I think a lot less people are doing that these days, right? And we're losing those really important skills. So yes, that relocalization and really taking responsibility for our lives, much like my grandmother did, right? My grandmother kept a diary from 1943 to 1956 of everything that she did every day, and she had 6 kids. And so a lot of it was, canned 12 quarts of tomatoes, made this from scratch, made that from scratch, did the, and it was all based in her hands and connected to the land. And so that's really, we're not too many generations away from that.
Yeah.
And yet now we have children who think that milk comes from the grocery store, right. And that's something that we need to really change.
Absolutely. Yeah. I was raised by a single mom, and she started out on her own young and didn't come into her parenting with a lot of those traditional skill sets. And so, she did a beautiful job. I'm eternally grateful to her. My goal with my family is to like, acquire some of those personally and then be able to hand them on. Right. And so, yeah, there's a lot there. But that's beautiful that your grandma has that diary, and it sounds like you have it now.
Yes. Yeah. They found it. My father didn't know that she had this diary, and they found it when they were cleaning out her place, and you know, she had these stacks and stacks of notebooks, and he had them transcribed. And so it is such a gift to you know, and because she was in central Minnesota, so very similar climate, or well, somewhat similar climate here, more water,
Yeah.
but at least a cold climate. Some of this, you know, she's doing some of the same things that I'm doing at that time of year. So sometimes I look back and compare what she's doing.
That's really cool. Yeah. Well, so on a little practical question coming your way, for those folks similar to myself, I sort of joke that like I am a grass farmer and I take so seriously my dedication to growing grass but I cheat a little bit because I highly leverage the use of animals. They're doing so much of the heavy lifting. I'm just coordinating. And so when it comes to growing produce for my family, I really feel like I have so much to learn. And if you were talking to someone who, you know, didn't have a green thumb, didn't know how to grow their own produce, but was really interested in being able to acquire that food for their family, you know, by out their front door or back door, what would you suggest would be like where to start, how to start practicing and acquiring that knowledge?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think you start locally with your community. So connect with, if there are garden clubs, or if there's somebody like me, for example, who teaches gardening, connect with local people, or nurseries oftentimes offer seminars, you know, just starting there. Also starting small. So I usually suggest for beginner gardeners that they have like 2 4x8 beds, you know, whether they're in ground or they're raised beds. So they start there so they understand kind of all of the time it takes and energy and maintenance it takes to care for that amount of space. And then I always like to say, you grow into your garden, right? Then maybe next year, if that was successful, then you do a 3rd bed, or, you know, but you don't take on 600 square feet of garden space that first year. You know, people get super excited, but then they also get overwhelmed. And so again, that permaculture principle of small and slow solutions, start there, kind of, you know, cut your teeth a little bit on growing, and choose like what you like to eat and what does well in this climate. And so sometimes I suggest, you know, easier crops like lettuces and kale and zucchini, and maybe bush beans and radishes and peas, right? So those are some of the basics. Maybe, especially in a cold climate, you don't take on peppers and tomatoes and eggplant and cucumbers right off the bat, because they're, you know, hot crops that take a little bit more care. They might need to be covered, you know, in terms of season extension. So it's really starting there. And also just in terms of design, like starting right outside your back door if you can, right? You know, if the sun allows for it. So, you know, your typical garden, you want it to be about 8 hours of sun a day. And so, but having it right outside your back door makes it more convenient, makes it such that you'll look at it more often, and then maintenance is easier. You know, you have a busy life, you're, you know, moving animals around, you have kids, you know, so, you know, making it as easy as possible to be able to participate in it. A lot of people like to kind of put that garden away. It's like they have to go to the garden. But, you know, another permaculture principle is integrate, don't segregate, right? We have this way of segregating our lives into these different pieces, and that translates oftentimes into segregating our yards as well. But, you know, you want that garden to be front and center, because it's a foundational piece to your life and your food. And so you want to be able to interact with it, and you want your children to be able to interact with it if you have them, you know. So start small, stay close is usually what I say.
That's awesome. Yeah, last year we started like that. Well, when we had our first daughter, we just wanted to do everything right and well right away. So we just plowed up a whole part of the backyard and tried to put in this garden, and we didn't have any of the skill sets or any mentorship or help, and it was a total failure. I mean, I think we got 2 carrots and we were like, whoa, we don't know what we're doing. And we put a pause on it. You know, our family has grown since, and a lot of things are different. But last year, I have an August birthday. For my birthday, we as a family built a raised garden bed. And I learned this cool thing from a friend about, I may mess this up, it's a German word like Kurgiculture or something.
Hugel
But
culture.
yes,
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
And that was hugely
Yeah.
helpful. Incorporated a lot of carbon and air and hold on to the water. And so I think, last year, only thing because I have a late August, well, I have a birthday in August, so there wasn't a lot of growing season left. So the only thing we successfully grew was buckwheat. And I was super
Nice.
happy. I was like, it can grow things.
Yes. Well, and I think that that's another thing that we have to remember. That's a big piece of advice that I give people, is that you will fail, and that's fine. Like, every season is an opportunity to learn. I think that if we start growing our own food as adults, we have this tendency to beat ourselves up if we fail. But I always say I fail every year at something that I try, right? If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough in gardening. And the other perspective to have is, if you've been growing food, like I've been growing a garden for 15 years, that means I've only grown tomatoes 15 times. You think of a musician who, can practice a song thousands of times. But for us, because we're connected to the seasons, because we're connected to the land, we are learning every year. And so having some grace and patience with ourselves, that this is a new skill that we're learning, right? Because it wasn't passed down. And so we are going to screw things up, and that's fine, and that's how it goes. But I think that integration too, for you, the advantages too, that with having animals do some of the work for you, with having animals bring in a lot of your fertility, I mean, that's a huge asset for you on your land as well.
So related to that question, or what you just mentioned there, rather, my next question is, for folks who don't have access to pasture, don't have, acres, don't have a lot of land, is this permaculture practice and site design, that kind of thing, is it only for folks who have elbow room in the country, or is there a way to practice this in town or even in like an urban area?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a fantastic question. Yeah, permaculture can be practiced at any scale on any piece of land, from urban to suburban to large scale acreage. And I think especially in cities where the majority of the world's population lives, right, we need to start to get very creative about using permaculture practices and principles in the way that we design things. So a lot of it's about, okay, so how can we grow food in a space in an urban environment? So you're going to get creative. Maybe it's rooftop gardening, or maybe it's container gardening or vertical gardening, that kind of stuff. Yeah. But also permaculture, to be a practicing permaculture practitioner, you don't have to be growing food either. If you look at some of the principles like produce no waste, or use and value diversity, or self-regulate and accept feedback, those are kind of also applied on a social level. So you kind of trying to reduce your consumption and being really conscious of what you buy is practicing permaculture. You going to a thrift store to get most of your clothes is practicing permaculture. You creating community and opportunities for people to gather, to network with one another and to just be there together, that's practicing permaculture. So I think that's something to also realize, is that we don't need land, but we do need to tackle things like land equity and access. We do need to tackle social justice, in urban environments, economic justice, racial justice, like all of those things can be part of practicing permaculture. But I do think figuring out innovative ways in which we can feed cities is going to be critical. And I think a lot of that does come from kind of community-based initiatives, and seeing how we can kind of on a local level meet a lot of our needs. It's not that we're going to meet every need. Another thing I wanted to say was, permaculture can be looked at as a toolbox too, right? It's a framework permaculture is the toolbox, and in the toolbox, you have all sorts of tools. So depending on the culture that you're in, the climate that you're in, you know, whether you have slope, et cetera, whether you're in a city or whether you aren't, you're going to take out certain tools. You're not going to use all of the tools, right, for every situation. So one of those tools is regenerative agriculture. So if you do have land, you're going to use that tool of regenerative agriculture. But another one of those tools is kind of, you know, reduce, reuse, right? You know, buy used things from the thrift store. And another one of those tools is rooftop gardening. And another one of those tools is water capture strategies like rain barrels or rain gardens or all of those things. So it's like
too.
Permaculture is the framework.
Vermiculture.
Oh, vermiculture, yes, yeah. So composting with worms. So in a small apartment, you could be doing mini animal husbandry with your worms and recycling your kitchen scraps, and then maybe you're using those worm castings for some container plants that you have on your balcony. So it's really getting innovative, and also realizing that we want to work towards self-reliance, not self-sufficiency. So we want to rely on other people. I want to rely on my farmers and growers and people like you, right? Because I recognize I'm not going to produce all of my own food. I don't want to. We're inherently communal people. I want to be exchanging with my neighbors and my friends. I want to be, you know, going to the farmers market and supporting livelihoods like yours. So it is really kind of piecing together the puzzle, not really thinking that we in isolation as the individual are going to be able to meet all of our needs.
That's really beautiful. Yeah. And I think in Montana, I think so many people are attracted to the idea of self-reliance, but it is sort of a false dichotomy. Like, and we are absolutely built for community. And that's such a beautiful point. And so just getting comfortable with the idea that, you know, maybe we don't need big industry or big government or big pharma, right? Because that's scary. And that's part of the attraction to self-reliance is the opposite, right? But community is not scary. Community is beautiful. And that was really well said. Thank you. So we are sort of coming to the end of our time together. I do want to make sure we have an opportunity to share that if someone has really enjoyed this conversation and would love to pick up with you and learn more about your services and all the wisdom that you have to share, where would they go? How would they continue that conversation?
Yeah, great. You can find me online, of course. I have a website, brokengroundpermaculture.com. You can follow me on Instagram at brokengroundmt. And then, yeah, I have a few different things coming up this season. June 2nd to 4th, I have a practical permaculture workshop that I'm teaching up at Sage Mountain Center in Whitehall, Montana, which is going to be really great. So that's an opportunity. And I work one-on-one with clients, helping them with design work. And then, of course, I have my signature program, which is my Resilient Homestead program, where I take people through site planning and process, and also give them content related to permaculture. So that happens in the early fall. So all of those ways, and in addition to working one-on-one with clients. Maybe I just said that.
That's awesome.
But yeah, get in touch via my website or via social media. If people definitely have questions about starting gardens. I also have a ton of resources on my website, a lot of videos, and also have a YouTube channel.
Yeah, I was going to mention, you do have a beautiful YouTube channel full of valuable videos. So we will both post this video and I'll include all those links to your website and your social channels so that people can find those there.
Yes, and I will do the same. Sounds great. Thank you, Catherine.
Thank you so much, Karina. It was a wonderful conversation, and I feel like we could totally have a much longer one, maybe again in the future.
Yes, we'll do it in person sometime.
That'd be lovely. Okay, well, thank you. You enjoy your second day of spring, and what do you guys have, like 2 inches of snow?
Yes, at least, and it's still snowing. So yeah, second day of spring. That's Montana. You know, it's a special type of person that can grow in this climate. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for this time, and yeah, we'll be in touch, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Thanks, Catherine.
Bye.
Bye.